Thanks for joining us once again. Today, we once again do a 2.0 version of a story we started doing a couple of days ago and had some sound issues, which I believe we've got solved. So what happened is that Tesla is now working on building a $100 million sort of Bay Area to Austin, Texas charging network. And we wanted to explore a number of elements of what's going on here and why. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Thanks once again for joining us. If this is your first time, welcome. If you're a repeat visitor, welcome back. We also want to thank our Patreon supporters. If you enjoy the show, would like some better ideas on investing and trading, please join us on Patreon. We also want to thank those of you who are there. It definitely makes us viable and is appreciated. So there's a story that came out from Bloomberg that indicated that Tesla has now started the process applying for a government grant to provide charging facilities for semi-trucks basically between the Bay Area and Austin, Texas. This route is about 1,800 miles, and the plan was to put 6 charging facilities there so that you could actually obviously charge your facilities as you move between each of these. But there's some interesting questions that kind of pop up with this thing. So the first item is that Tesla has actually announced that the plan is, because they're seeking government funding, these charging facilities will be open to not only Tesla electric semi-trucks, but those of other manufacturers. And so I think that's a good thing. It adds to the charging network, and Tesla generates revenue from that potentially. So the next interesting point is that the route is in essence 1,800 miles. And so if you do some quick math, 1,800 miles divided by 6 locations is approximately 300 miles between each of these facilities. So the next question that comes up is, well, wait a second, 90% of the trucks that we've been tracking have availability of miles between charges of somewhere between 200 and 250 miles. But Tesla's offering potentially charging facilities that go obviously much shorter than the average truck's charging distance. The only exception to that is the 500-mile Tesla vehicle. So if you're driving the Tesla Semi, you have 500 miles of range, you actually are comfortably able to go 300 miles and charge up at that point. Now, there are other things that a truck might be doing, for example, running air conditioning, running heating, obviously, during the winter months, etc., the radio. There's a lot of things that a truck could be running that are consuming power that one might be aware of. You could also have issues with, depending on the time of year, the battery might actually need some warm-up charging or some cool-down charging. So all of these things going on will consume some of the battery life of that vehicle. So what I'm angling for is the fact that after you go through more calculations, if and when this charging network is built, it will likely be primarily used by Tesla vehicles until competing firms are able to catch up with their range capabilities. So the next question that pops up then is, well, wait a second, why is Tesla doing this? The reason we're putting a why out there, and we could probably provide some of the answer, but not all of it, is that what Elon indicated was that 70% of the truck fleets out there actually use those trucks on an approximately 250-mile route. So in general, if your starting point is A your final destination is B, which is about 250 miles away, as you've stopped at distribution points, and then you're on the way back, that's about 70% of the market. So it was our understanding that what Tesla would do then is really concentrate on this market and winning it before messing with anything that's longer distance, because you know there are a lot of problems with electric, in particular the amount of time, uh, i.e. a half hour or so it takes to get that charge back up to either 80 or 100%. And so if you insert all of these time-based charging facilities, you're negatively impacting the drive time of those vehicles by the drivers. So so I thought this was interesting that Tesla chose to do this. And what also comes to mind as we look at this is that the thought was that Elon would actually focus on, okay, how do we build the semi-vehicles and then start getting them out to customers? Well, it turns out that the internal fleet for Tesla is larger than the external fleet of vehicles that have been sold already. So Tesla seems to be heavily looking at the fact that, well, wait a second, they've got like a 500 truck fleet of vehicles that haul parts between their different production facilities. Then they probably have another 500 vehicles that actually haul finished cars in different parts of the country. The delivery methods are either train or truck, typically. And so by the company focusing on kind of their internal needs when it comes to the semi, it has a double benefit. Number one, they get to test to make sure the vehicles work under different conditions. Number two, they lower their own costs as part of optimizing the fact that they don't have to run diesel trucks over those distances, and they get a long-term sort of data flow on their own products. So there are clearly other benefits, but I have to say that I'm kind of stunned by the choice, given the fact that the queue has been 4 years long so far, and a number of customers are starting to evaluate using other manufacturers because the fixed delivery times that they were hoping to see from Tesla haven't been showing up. And it introduces the question of, will there be a finish in a timely fashion for this whole thing? So the next thing that I wanted to cover here is the fact that I'd have to say congratulations on this decision. What's going to happen, and we'll see how it works out, is that this is actually a beta test for the Semi becoming a nationwide vehicle. So I do think it's kind of strange to have the vehicle routing being, let's say, Bay Area to Austin, because if you think of every large city in the country, be it Los Angeles, San Francisco, let's say Austin, Houston, Dallas, the routing of most trucks tend to run between the largest population centers. So I'm hopeful that Tesla gets the government grant to build these facilities, but I think that that would be a lot likelier if the way the trip setup or pattern of how these were going to be installed fit the natural sort of freight routes. So for example, I think it would make a lot of sense to simply run 1,800 miles out of Los Angeles into sort of Dallas and Houston versus the routing that we're talking about. But if we do that, we don't necessarily get an optimization by Tesla of the routing of their vehicles in order to move all manner of batteries, parts, and vehicles between all of their facilities. So we shall see if the funds arrive, etc. I guess the final thing I wanted to point out here is that the stated cost of that facility is $100 million approximately. Tesla wants to put up 5 or 10 million and the remainder by the government. It is good that others will be able to use it, but I have to say that given that the others can't go greater than 250 miles, I think the likelihood is real low. So it's smart for Tesla to offer that at those gaps. But I just think those gaps make it non-viable for competing trucking organizations. So I chose to do this show today because it's part of our pattern of keeping an eye on what's going on with the semi. Number one. Number two, I wanted to point out that as we're finding new and different use cases for the semi, it starts to impact the thinking process of end users about how they might use the vehicle once they get their copies. So we definitely look forward to your comments on this. We definitely will have more as we learn other elements of what's going on with the semi. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Now, again, I chose to focus on this show on a book called On Death and Dying by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. So it turns out that there are 5 stages that people tend to go through as they die. The first stage is denial. The 5th stage is acceptance. And so this book by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross reflects her research on this. And I think it's a really useful tool because one of her conclusions is every time you have a major growth spurt in life, the sort of the pattern, that we all roll through is exactly the same. So just wanted to remind you that we do our 25 leg lifts a day. We also wanted to remind you that we wanted you to try a 20-minute walk daily, referenced by one of our doctors. And don't forget to try one of the forms of fasting, for example, eating on half the clock or 12-hour side of the clock rather than sort of eating throughout the day was another suggestion. At any rate, this is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Tschüss, German, au revoir, French, lahitro, Hebrew, hoda, hafez, Farsi. And in Jamaica, we say, enough respect, walk good man. Arrivederci, and thanks for joining us, and have a great day.